hear me and who's out there, but I'm Tracy Signestad. I'm the state coordinator for South Dakota Project Learning Tree. This is Josh Larson, and he is with
South Dakota Department of Ag.
Okay. He is one of our state foresters that will be helping with our training here today. So Josh and I, we were responsible for doing a lot of the forestry tests. He's going to do the practical part, and I wanted to answer questions for people about some of the written part, some of the theory part. I've been offering programs in our, I don't know if you can see this, but this is our Focus on Forest module for Project Learning Tree. A lot of what you would learn in this module with your teams or with your classes, even your classrooms, is what is the knowledge, the theory that your students are going to need to know for the competition, and then any jobs in natural resources for forestry or whatever. So I was going to let Josh start with doing tree measurements and talking about some of the practical stuff first and showing the instruments first. That way we'll give it a little bit more time before people show up, and if they do have questions about things or the resources that I sent out, that I can answer them. So here's Josh.
Okay. I don't know. Do you think I should stand up there, Tracy?
Sure.
All right.
Maybe we should ask if anybody's out there. Are there any teams that have joined us yet?
Okay.
All right. Doesn't appear so. So I guess I will just talk to you about, was it 5 empty rooms, 6 empty rooms at the moment? Anyways.
Still get to see it on video.
Oh, there you go. Get to see it on video. So, when you're doing measurements out in the forest, there's a few different things that you want, kind of depending on your purpose. For instance, some of the tools that we use, of course, is we have a nice 100-foot long measuring tape. You need that just to lay out different plots for sampling different tree sizes, so you can figure out how much basal area and how many board feet you'd potentially get out of a stand. One of the common tools that we use quite a bit here is just your standard diameter tape. This tape comes typically with two sides. One side is a standard, there's a measuring tape in your standard 1 foot increments, except the inches are in, it's tenths of a foot rather than your standard 12 inches per foot, so just something to keep in mind when you're writing down your measurements. The other side of that tape is the one you'll be using quite a bit. It's the diameter equivalent side. So basically how you would use this is that you would hook it into the tree at a point about 4.5 feet above the ground. That's called your diameter at breast height. For most adults or people my size, I'm about 5'11", that's going to be somewhere about the center of your chest. If you're a shorter person or if you're a taller person, you'll kind of have to figure out where that is on your body. But that's the height you want to pretty much do all your measurements at on the tree. And so anyways, though, you would take this thing, you would hook it into the tree at that height, wrap it all the way around the tree, and that'll give you the diameter of that tree in inches. Now once you have the diameter, you can use that number to figure out all sorts of other things like circumference, board feet, and different measurements that you might need depending on what you're doing that day. Okay. Another tool that we use to get measurements on a tree is a fairly common one, and it's very useful or not very useful depending on who you ask. It's called a Biltmore stick. It kind of looks like a yardstick. It has a beveled edge on it, and each side has a different measurement that you can use on the tree. For instance, you can measure how many logs are in the tree in 8-foot or 16-foot increments on this particular stick. Some will have it in different lengths. It really depends on which type you're using. Another thing you can do with this is you can figure out the tree diameter. So similar to the diameter tape, how to use this is you hold it out from your body at around 25 inches, which for most adults is the length of your arm. And you hold it out with the left side of the stick flush with that edge of the tree, and then just using your eyes, don't actually move the stick because that'll throw off your measurements, then using your eyes, look to see where it hits the right side of the tree, and that'll give you the diameter of the tree. It's really nice for just quick measurements. It only goes up to certain diameters though, so sometimes if you're dealing with really large trees, this isn't going to work, but this will be good for standard timber measurements, like if you're going out looking for trees to cut for sawmills and things like that, because most of them are going to fit within this range. They get too big and they're just a lot more difficult to handle. Okay. Another tool that we use quite a bit out in the field, if we have forgotten our more advanced tools, is just your standard clinometer, and how these are used is to calculate the height of the tree. One of the most common and easiest methods to calculate the height of a tree using one of these is to walk out 100 feet from the tree, and assuming you're on level ground, what you do is you just hold it up to your face like this, keeping both eyes open. And you look at the tree. And you look at the tree with this thing. First you zero it out, figure out where that is on the tree. Sometimes that'll be 2, 3, 4 feet above the ground. Sometimes it'll be right at the base of the tree. But kind of figure out where that is and remember. And then you take this thing and you look all the way up to the crown of the tree. And then remember the number that you see on the right-hand side. Okay? Whatever that number may be. It could be 50, it could be 70, it could be 85. All right? And then take thing, go back to the 0 point, go down to the bottom of the tree, and remember that number. Add those two numbers together. And if you're standing at 100 feet, that'll be the height of the tree within a couple feet or so. You know, it's kind of depends on how accurately you can place it at the top and the bottom of the tree. But usually you'll be within a couple feet, and in forestry, that's accurate enough for the most part. You can also use this at 50 feet, but the only difference is you have to, that number that you get by adding the two measurements together, you have to divide that by 2. It's typically a little less accurate than standing at 100 feet, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much how you use this guy. It's fairly basic. There's slightly different models out there used in slightly different ways, but for this particular one, 100 feet's your best bet, and it'll give you the most accurate measurements. You can also use the cruising stick to calculate heights, but I prefer the clinometer and the diameter tape pretty much because they're small and they fit in my vest a lot easier when I'm out cruising. And those are the ones I like to use. And if you're really lucky too, we also have a laser rangefinder. It's called a hypsometer, and we can use that to calculate the height of the tree from any point. We can be 4 feet from the tree, we can be 200 feet from the tree. So that's nice if you have it, but it does run out of battery power. So it's nice to have just the simple mechanical tools with you that are durable and they won't break and won't run out of battery, which is pretty nice. Well, I shouldn't say they won't break. I have broke one of these, but don't tell your boss that. It doesn't go so well. Some of the other tools that I use, specifically not just in forest measurements, but looking at other things, is just a standard hand lens. You use this to identify small characteristics, look at the buds, identify disease characteristics, like looking for tiny little fruiting bodies that might indicate a fungus that's giving the tree some problems. Another tool that we use fairly commonly, depending on what measurements you're seeking, is a increment borer. Comes apart just like that. And what you use this for is you can bore into the center of the tree and pull out a small sample of the wood. So you can use this to figure out a couple different things. If you're pretty good at it and you get a full boring out of the tree, you can figure out how old the tree is, roughly. You can also use this to check for pockets of decay and other things in the center of the tree, which might indicate health or other issues if you're trying to determine the health of the stand, things of that nature. It's fairly simple to use, but unfortunately without a live tree to demonstrate on, it's kind of hard to.
Have some samples too.
I know, but I don't want to bore into these guys.
No, in here in your, that's what it would look like if it came out.
I don't know if you'll be able to see it that well or not, but what comes out is this tiny little sample. Maybe we might be able to zoom it in here a little bit.
Zoom you in.
It's this tiny little sample that comes out of the center of the bore. This particular one, well, you can see it, there we go. This particular one is from a bur oak. I got it about a week ago when I was gathering some samples for this presentation, actually. And as you can see, it's obviously not the full length of the device that you use to pull it out with, but sometimes it takes practice to get good at this, and unfortunately I haven't done it enough to get a lot of practice at it, but more often than not they'll break on the way out, so you got to scotch tape them back together, and it's a whole thing. Okay. Was there anything else you wanted me to cover, Tracy? Or?
No. We want to show our tree cookie here. We'll use your big one.
Big one.
One of the things that they'll need to know is how to count tree rings. So zoom in on. Whoops. It's as good as I can really get it. It's not a document camera. So this is our tree cookie. And there's the students are going to need to know, there'll be a tree cookie sample in one of the stations, and the team will need to be able to count how many or how old the tree is. So they're also going to need to learn to know terms like early wood and late wood and what that means, and what rings to count. So we have dark ones and we have light ones, and the dark ones are the late wood, and the light ones are the early wood. Correct me if I'm wrong. You only count one. You count either the light or the dark.
Well, yeah, what you're seeing is the difference between the growth of the tree. So, for instance, like you said, the late wood, it's the slower growth. It's when the tree is slowing down. The early wood is the spring wood. So that's when it has lots of moisture, has lots of sunlight. That's when it's doing its most explosive growth. And that's essentially what you're counting. Each time you see one of those bands, it signifies like the two different parts of the growing season, I guess, is what you could explain it as. Okay.
So the students will need to know how to count, so they can count either one, right? Mm-hmm. Either the light or the dark. Another thing that the students will need to know, you'll need to know about your tree life cycle, the life cycle that a tree goes into from the time it's a seed until it's a mature tree. Some other issues, parts of the tree, things such as heartwood, cambium, xylem, phloem. Those are some things that you'll need to discuss with your teammates and so forth, and with the coaches will need to discuss with their teams. So mostly I really wanted to answer questions for people and show resources. Kim did send out an email that listed a whole bunch of resources on there that discusses these things, that you can watch videos that show, up close, somebody counting the tree rings, up close about the different parts of the tree, like the xylem, the phloem, the cambium, the heartwood, things like that. So there will be 5 trees that the students will need to ID. I have a fella out there now that's IDing them, and I'd like to send a list of about 15 trees for the students to familiarize themselves with, and out of that list, 5 of those trees will be picked and will be on the exam. We have a lot of trees in South Dakota, so we don't want the kids to have to learn the whole dichotomous key of the trees of South Dakota. So that's our hopes, to have that done before competition. So if there's anybody out there, please chime in. Okay, well, is there anything else you'd like us to cover?
I think as long as you covered all the areas of study that they need to have, I think we're probably very good. And if they have questions, they can email you or Josh or myself. Okay. Otherwise, check out sdenvirothon.org and look for the study guide for forestry. And they will probably be able to find many things there. And then there were a few things that were put in their resource binder, their little starter kit. So if they want to give us a holler, we welcome them to do so.
So there's forest ecology, there's tree physiology, forest management, things like succession. Just familiarize yourself with things like that. Of course, all the instruments that Josh just showed, the students will need to know how to use them and be able to identify them and what they're used for. Not like, that's a Biltmore stick, but what is it for? So things like that. So I'm sure everybody will do great, and I am available to email at southdakotaplt@gmail.com or at 605-484-2330 to answer any questions, and looking forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.